This episode is brought to you by Manhattan Associates, the global leader in supply chain and unified commerce. From warehouses, transportation, inventory and order management, to store fulfillment and point of sale, Manhattan helps brands like Arc'teryx, Lacoste, and L'Oreal to unify their supply chains and turn stores into customer-first assets with real-time insights and tools that empower associates to deliver outstanding service. What holiday marketing trends are you observing right now? Everyone is fighting for the same share of wallet. What advice do you have for brands that are looking to stand out in this crowded market?
A lot of families, and particularly the teenagers that are now becoming young adults, they're leaning into nostalgia. They like things that feel retro, that feel like their home when they grew up. Many of them are introducing the elf on the shelf on their university campuses, and they're having them in their dorm rooms. And so we're seeing this evolution in terms of fandom that has to do with nostalgia, authenticity, that warm, cozy feeling you had with your family, and potentially as you have a family of your own, recreating those moments.
You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. Hello and welcome back to Retail Disrupted. It's officially December, so we are going to be diving into all things Christmas on today's episode. Now, few executives understand the intersection of holiday marketing, tradition, and consumer behavior like Christa Pitts. She's the co-CEO and co-founder of the Lumistella Company, home to the Elf on the Shelf, and one of the most successful holiday franchises in history. Under her strategic leadership, more than 31 million the Elf on the Shelf brand Scout Elves, Elf Pets, and Elf Mates have been adopted in 26 countries across 5 continents. Christa's journey began as a QVC program host, where she amassed 2,000 hours of live, unscripted television experience. During this time, she honed her expertise in understanding the mechanics of sales, the intricacies of advertising, and the significance of brand authenticity. This wealth of knowledge proved invaluable when she joined forces with her mother and twin sister to share their cherished family Christmas tradition with the world. Christa, it's so great to have you here. I know we have an 8-hour time difference working against us today, but we have made it happen. So welcome to the show. Now, to get us started, I think I just sort of alluded to this in the intro. What you've created is not just a product. You've created a global cultural phenomenon, a multi-platform holiday empire. You're reaching millions of people around the world. But let's go back to the very beginning. How did you come up with the idea for the Elf on the Shelf?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely beginning to feel a lot like Christmas, despite the time zone difference. And it's exciting to share our story, actually, because it began with my family many, many years ago. My grandmother had an elf that was in our family home, and that elf sat on a Christmas tree. And my grandmother, of course, looked at my mom and my uncle, and they were being a bit rowdy and said, "You know, that elf works for Santa." And many, many years later, when my mom had her own children and we were growing up, we had that same elf visiting our home. And that elf's name was Fizbee. And we would race out of bed every morning to find Fizbee because, as mom shared with us, the elf would show up in the Americas at Thanksgiving. And then every night while we were sleeping, the elf would fly to Santa, then give a report on whatever had happened that day, and then fly back and hide in a new spot in our home. And so for us, it was the most magical experience. It was like Christmas morning every single day for myself and my siblings. And there were a couple rules. You weren't allowed to touch the elf or it could lose its magic. And of course, the elf is there to watch and listen, so it's not going to be able to talk to you. And it's from that seed that started back in the 1970s in our own family home that ultimately my mom and sister got Santa's permission, of course, and end up writing what would become the Elf on the Shelf.
I love it. And did you expect it to become such a success? Like in the early days, did you have any idea that it could blow up in the way that it did?
So let me just recount the fact that we had absolutely no money at all. We had no resources. We weren't famous. There wasn't any well to dig from. And so it was a really true grit, tenacity story in terms of how we wanted to share our family tradition that we loved so much with other families because we knew they would love it. And I think that's a little bit of the magic that we had in terms of our story, which is that my sister and I both knew what it was like to grow up with an elf that worked for Santa in your home. And so we got it from a child's perspective. Instead of what can be at times the jaded adult mentality with a million things going on and it's the holidays, we were able to see it from that perspective. And it was just so magical. It was the favorite part of the holidays. So from that perspective, yes, I ultimately thought when families get this in their home, if they'll get it in their home, if they'll just take a chance on it, those kids will experience it the same way that we did. And so, from that perspective, I did perceive it would be very successful. What I didn't anticipate was the rise of social media and the speed at which all of it would explode.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that because there's this whole community dedicated to inspiration and ideas for the elf, like Facebook groups, Pinterest boards, YouTube channels. What I guess how has that changed your business? I mean, I'm sure it's given you even more visibility, but what was that sort of evolution like for you?
Well, at first, it just started with, of course, when we first started the company 20 years ago, the internet was a baby. So that part of what we've enjoyed seeing along this ride went from what was MySpace, right? Very limited, mostly focused on music, to eventually Facebook. And then you had the universe of Meta, and now there's Pinterest, and there's TikTok, and there's all these other platforms. And so it's really been an evolution for us as a business because what you need when you first start is not necessarily what you need as you grow. Consumer behavior patterns have changed quite a bit. The way younger shoppers engage with content versus older shoppers, where they're looking to shop, what that experience is like. So it has been a learning curve for us, but it started just with the elf on the shelf, and then ultimately, we started seeing this incredible creativity from our fans in terms of some elves have personalities that are pretty laid back, like their family, and others have personalities that are larger than life and uber creative. And so we were
Mhm.
really starting to see that metamorphosis of family experience from just an elf that's, very much laid back to ones that are just full of fun all over the home, at school, at the playground, all over the place. So that has been a
A little
big
bit naughty.
evolution for us. Yeah, yeah, there might be a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
mischief in there too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think families have gotten, I mean, I can speak from experience, really creative with the elf on the shelf. What are some of your favorite or most memorable ways that people have used the elf to bring a little bit of that holiday magic into their homes? Do you have any
Oh,
examples you could
holiday
share?
joy. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you have to remember that when a family adopts an elf, they name it, and that's how it gets its Christmas magic. And of course, all of that is in the book that comes along with the elf on the shelf. And so for me, a lot of the magic I see is when that child adopts an elf and then they find it the next morning. It's like this huge moment of awakening and magic and just everything the holidays is meant to represent in terms of that childhood wonder. So for me, that's a big piece of it. And then, of course, there's this evolution as time goes on. We've even leaned into it quite a bit. We have a whole line of products that centers around elf props and elf kits to help families that have an elf that needs a little inspiration, that needs a little help along the way, just to make it very, very easy. So our Scout Elves at Play set, certainly any of our prop sets, the elf ideas come along with those, and they're in daily portions. So it makes it really easy for parents to feel a bit more creative. And then I'm always just amazed with the places that the elf tends to hide, whether it's in the freezer because it misses the North Pole, or in a bowl of cereal. No milk, of course. But just the creativity of families and the way they make those moments magical is just something I continue to be in awe of.
Yeah, and to your earlier point, how quickly those moments can go viral now on social media.
Oh,
I want to
yes.
touch on something that you started to talk about, which was just how shopping habits are evolving because retail has changed fundamentally. I'd say since you
Mhm.
started 20 years ago, much more digital. But I guess in some ways, as we move more of our lives online, and as things like AI play a bigger role in our lives, I personally feel that this reinforces the need for more memorable experiences, those kind of analog experiences, traditions, like Elf on the Shelf. So I'd love to get your take on this, Krista. How important is emotional connection these days, and how are you evolving to stay relevant to shoppers?
Yeah, I think there's two components to that question. The first is that we are authentic, right? The elf on the shelf is the elf on the shelf is the elf on the shelf. It doesn't have a lot of fancy widgetry. You don't have to be the most athletic family or the smartest family or the wealthiest family to enjoy. Anyone can adopt an elf and have that experience in their home. And we had three members of my sibling group growing up, and the elf did that job for all of us. And then some families have, two or three or four elves. But ultimately, the authenticity we have in terms of my sister and I, this started as a family business. It's still a family business. Everything we do is about creating joyful family moments. We're not in this for some reason other than legacy and to share this moment we had growing up with the world. And so I think there's an authenticity component. I think there's a simplicity component. I think there's the opportunity for us to remove the noise that happens during the holiday season and just have something as simple or as fun or as complicated as you want it to be. And I do think that makes a difference because there's so much noise during the holidays. It's just everything is bling, 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 bling. Pay attention to me now. Get all your shopping done. Wrap all the presents. Make sure you're at all the parties. Make sure you have the right clothes to wear to them. Like, just, it's a busy time. So, having something that's just simple in your home that your family adores and kids find joy in is something I think every parent can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting about your product is that I mean, is it even a product? I mean, it feels more like an experience, right? And that's so powerful in retail today. And also to your point around simplicity and the fact that I imagine you don't have that many competitors because what you do is so differentiated. And that as well, I think, is such an important lesson for retailers to offer something that really stands out. And so, yeah, interesting to see how, you're combining all those things, authenticity, storytelling, and ultimately, I guess it's about building trust and connection with your audience.
Yeah, again, like I said, everything we do is about creating joyful family moments in terms of every aspect of what we're involved in. So whether it's experiences or gaming or our hard goods products or anything that we work on, it's all about trying to stay true to that. And then our vision of telling the stories of Santa's North Pole, our elf pets, for instance, kids were writing us, they're calling us. Hey, does my elf have a pet? If so, what is it? What does it eat? Where does it live? What happens? So we continue to evolve the business to match the questions of the children and the families. And I think, again, that's something we're able to lean into with authenticity. And we love creating those moments and hearing from our fans. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Yeah, and if your customers can be fans, that's the best place. You can't ask for anything more than that, right? As a
Oh
brand.
gosh. Yeah, right? That's the best thing there is to be able to hear from your fans and have it be, "Oh my gosh, you won't believe what my elf did," or that my elf pet was doing this, and it's just so much fun.
Definitely, definitely. Now, I just want to touch on something that you mentioned already, which is that it is a very crowded market, and even more so during the holidays. Everyone is fighting for the same share wallet, and I'd love to get your thoughts. What holiday marketing trends are you observing right now, and what advice do you have for brands that are looking to stand out in this crowded market?
Yeah, I think a lot of families, and particularly the teenagers that are now becoming young adults, they're leaning into nostalgia, right? They like things that feel retro, that feel like their home when they grew up. Many of them are introducing the Elf on the Shelf on their university campuses, and they're having them in their dorm rooms. And so we're seeing this evolution in terms of fandom that has to do with nostalgia, authenticity, looking back, that warm, cozy feeling you had with your family, and potentially as you have a family of your own, recreating those moments. You know, you mentioned something earlier about the Elf on the Shelf, and we like to call it at times a tradition in a box, right? And it's so hard to find great traditions anymore. Sometimes you hear about one that a family creates, but one that is ubiquitous among your friends and your family members and your schoolmates, that's hard to come by. And so I do believe one of the pieces of our success is that we come back year after year with that nostalgic feel. It's what you grew up with. It's just like thinking back to, you know, watching your favorite Charlie Brown special or The Grinch, and you curl up on the couch and you eat popcorn and you enjoy these Christmas moments or movies. They might even be new favorites, but it's that same nostalgic feel that you're going for. You get the hot cocoa out, you put on the matching jammies, you get your blanket, and you just dive into that moment. So I think that's what keeps us relevant year after year, along with the other products we've introduced.
Yeah. And what about seasonality? Because I guess maybe the only challenging side to all of this is you've got a product that's so tied to Christmas. So, how do you kind of maintain engagement with your customers and brand presence throughout the year? So, like, what does the elf get up to in July and August?
It's a great question. We do get it quite a bit, but you have to remember the North Pole is 365, right? And so when the elf is no longer in your home, the elf is back at the North Pole working for Santa Claus. And because of that, it allows us to tell stories outside of immediately the seasonal space when your elf comes to visit you. So I'll give you a couple examples. We've just announced the launch of our brand new preschool program. It's going to be on YouTube Kids beginning on November 24th. And it's all about the Frost Pips, who are basically, you know, the elf babies, as it were. Um, and them in their first episode meeting these characters that are elves at the North Pole that are trying to do good and telling the stories of what's happening there, but in a way that preschoolers can understand. So numbers and colors and letters and music and learning are all part of that process, but it takes us outside of just what's happening directly in your home at Christmas time. It's ubiquitous to the full universe of the North Pole. And then we also just launched our Nicholas the Noble chapter book, which is for more of those middle grades readers. And if you love more, think Harry Potter ish fantastical books. This will lean into that space, but it tells the backstory of a young, what would become Santa Claus, so a young Nicholas and his dog Barry, and how they come to know the elves that become the elf on the shelf. It's thousands of years of backstory about how Santa becomes Santa. So again, you can see us through the Santaverse, as we call it, with different characters and different experiences and different lore, being able to lean into moments that just aren't directly centralized on Christmas.
Yeah, I love that. The Santaverse.
The
um,
Santaverse.
the Santaverse. I love it. Krista, before we wrap up, if there's one thing that you'd like the brands that are listening in today to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it's to be focused. If you're trying to build a brand, and most people are, whether it's themselves or their company or what they're selling, it's all branding, right? And so I think you really do have to take a step back and understand that you can't be everything to everyone. You have to find what differentiates you, your business, your product, and then you need to focus on that. You're never going to be able to meet everyone else's expectations. I tell people quite often when they're looking for inspiration around their own entrepreneurial journey that you are going to believe in what you are doing more than anyone else. No one else will be able to represent it or authenticate it in the way that you can. So get out from behind your screen, even though it's tempting to spend your time there, and build relationships, because people buy from people they like. They always have. My father used to tell me that. He was the consummate salesman, and he's right. They buy from people they like, be authentic, have a handshake, be your bond, and you'll find success in whatever it is you're doing.
Fantastic. Christa, thank you so much for sharing your time and insights with us today. Elf on the Shelf is such an incredible example of creativity, storytelling, brand authenticity, and it's really inspiring to see how you've built a tradition that means so much to so many people. So thank you again for coming on.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.